Okay, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. So this is the first ever video we did for Infosyte Malaysia as a live preview class for VMCE program LVC demo. So as you will see here, we'll be utilizing Zoom meeting application for this live virtual class onwards. And before the class starts, always we will have some introduction to Zoom system for these participants to familiarize the system, what they can actually do and interact with the trainer. Okay, so let's move on for today's live session. Okay, so some brief introductions of myself and the company. My name is Daniel. I'm the Veeam Certified Trainer in Malaysia. So as you can see on the right is actually my photo. And I'm from a company called Infosyte Sdn Bhd. We are the only one Veeam Authorized Education Center, short we call VMAEC in Malaysia. So you will see that if you are planning to get certified with exam, you need to register through us, at least for Malaysia counterpart. Okay, so for today's live session, these are the agenda. First, we'll look into the VMCE standard course overview, just to show you around what we'll be covering during this 3 days VMCE course. And the next thing will be the live virtual class demo with a short topic coming from the same training itself, just to let you familiarize and experience how the live virtual class will be going on. And later on, I will also show you what are the training material included when you sign up to this VMCE program. And lastly, also the online lab demo. So before I start it, let me just launch the lab for it to load for a while. Okay, then I will show you around in the lab itself later on. Okay, so let's move on to our course overview. Okay, so during these 3 days VMCE standard class, being in the classroom or live virtual class itself, will be covering the same numbers of topics. So as you will see over here, the first 2 days will cover up to like 12 topics over here. So in the VMCE standard, we'll be covering most of the standard core component, know-how, configuration, and administration. And total will be covering 21 topics during these 3 days. So you can always go back to this video to have a look what are the topics that we'll be covering in this VMCE course. So let's do a brief introduction onto the product that we'll be covering in the VMCE standard course. So you will see in the middle is basically Veeam focused product currently. So the product in color coded will be covered in VMCE standard course. So all our discussion and also lab itself will be focusing in the Veeam Backup and Replication, short for VBR. This is the core software product that Veeam uses for backup and restore job management. And we will be also covering data labs. This is used for the sure backup testing functionality. So the backup replication is designed to protect private cloud solution, a private cloud solution, where it comes with VMware and Hyper-V. So in our discussion during the training, we'll be focusing more towards VMware and also Hyper-V technology. Nutanix AHV is not included in our training itself. And we do support managed cloud using Cloud Connect Partner, where you can store your backup and replication resources to our Cloud Connect Partner repository and infrastructure. But in our training, we will not be covering the public cloud solution, where you can also utilize Veeam solution to backup, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, etc. Okay, so next thing you will see that the Veeam backup replication can also be deployed in a distributed environment to cover edge computing and IoT for remote office, branch office facility. And if you're looking onto the physical workload where your infrastructures come with some legacy or even physical workstation and laptops that requires to be backed up using Veeam, we do cover the agents for Windows and Linux topic for that. And you will see that the software as a service Office 365 is also supported in Veeam solution, but we will not be covering that during our training itself. And lastly, we have the Veeam One solution for monitoring and reporting. It will be also included in the VMC standard course. And in Veeam, we do have another, what we call the Veeam Availability Orchestrator, short for VAO. This is another solely standalone product, mainly to provide extra feature on backup and DR testing management and recovery. So this one will come with its own training. There is not in general availability yet. So this is some brief introduction on what other product will be covered during this VMCE standard course. Okay, so next thing, just some brief introduction onto the certificate training available currently in Veeam solution. So if you are providing Veeam product solution to your customer, you might need to go for at least the VMCE standard course that we are now doing introduction to it, whereby this is the first standard starting course that you will actually participate before you will start off with your certification track. So this course comes with 3 days training, as I already mentioned earlier, and also with a registered official written exam. Now, for Veeam itself, if you would like to take the exam to be certified, you need to join a VMC standard course from any Veeam authorized education center. You can also sign up with us later on if you are interested. Okay, so over here for this VMC standard course, we will be covering install, configure, and manage, mainly on the core component product that I already mentioned and introduced you earlier. So after you clear off the VMC standard, you can then move on to a more advanced training called the VMCEA Advanced, mainly focused in design and optimization. For short, we call it ADO. And this is a 2 days course focused mainly on design and optimization for architecture and deployment. So you will see that over here in this course, for 2 days, we will discuss more in depth on how many core CPU and RAM memory to put in into your solution design. This will be a 2 days course with workshop every day, and you will basically design a solution from a textbook on the spot in a group coursework. And after you have gone through the 2 days training, you can prepare for the ADO exam. And after you clear both VMC standard exam and the ADO exam, you are now certified as the Veeam Certified Architect, what we call VMCA. So as you will see here for the Veeam Solution Certification track itself, it is pretty easy for you to achieve architect level with only 2 different exams. So let's move on with more content. And when you sign up with the VMCE standard course, it will come with some lab session during the class. All this will be done via a remote online lab infrastructure. So you will see over here is basically to introduce you what are the machines included in your lab environment. So you will see that over here we have left and right infrastructure. On the left is basically your particular backup infrastructure component. So over here for the Veeam Cloud Virtual Machine, this is mainly used for S3 object storage capacity tier simulation. And you have the Veeam VBR virtual machine over here. This is basically your Veeam backup server. All your lab will actually perform in this machine itself. And when you log into the remote lab, this is basically your landing machine. And in your backup infrastructure, we do come with a virtual tape library to simulate tape configuration lab. And in the backup infrastructure, we do come with a standalone Active Directory domain controller, mainly for the backup infrastructure user account authentication. And this Windows Server machine comes as a multi-role, where it also acts as a WAN accelerator. Okay, to simulate WAN accelerator lab itself. And this is also a Hyper-V machine that is hosting a tiny Veeam 2 virtual machine, mainly to simulate Hyper-V online lab session. And then we do have another Veeam VSA. This is a HPE store virtual storage system. Mainly will be used for the Veeam ESX machine data store to simulate storage integration lab purposes. So these are the backup infrastructure machine that you will always work with it. And on the right is our main focus on the actual production workload. So during your online lab session, you will have some lab simulation mainly to backup and restore domain controller Active Directory solution, Exchange server as you can see here, EX01, SharePoint machine, Oracle database, and also the old hardware version virtual machine just to simulate monitoring and reporting Veeam software online lab. So we have the tiny Veeam machine mainly for replication function, and also another VM used for physical workload simulation, mainly to show you how agent configuration works. So these are the virtual machine included in your online lab, and when you sign up with the program, you will get the online lab access for 3 months, 90 days. So after the class or training, you can always log in back to the lab itself to perform practice and even testing itself. So later on, in the end of the session, I will actually demo to you how the online lab actually looks like. Okay, so there goes with our overview. So if you have any question or some inquiry, you can always leave a comment in this live session, or you can even contact our sales rep later on after this particular session. So in the end of the slide, I will basically show you some contact, or even later when you come back to this live video that we will save it as a copy, you will find all the information in the description itself. Okay, so let's move on. Next thing, we'll look into the live virtual class demo. So over here, I will just utilize one of the short topic called the general options from the VMC standard course to actually show you how we will be conducting the class for the online live virtual training. So over here, we'll be covering backup IO control feature, global notification, data transfer, network rules, and also preferred network. So let's move on. Okay, so in the backup IO control, this is a global settings that you can find it in the Veeam backup and replication software on the main menu itself. So over here, you can enable the storage latency control if your licensing is having from enterprise and above. So if you have an enterprise license, you can always enable this feature. By default, it's disabled. It will require the administrator to enable it with their own millisecond number conversion to fit their own infrastructure. So over here, you will see we have two options over here. Stop assigning new tasks to data store at 20 milliseconds. And another one will be throttling the IO for your backup task with 30 millisecond latency. Okay, so these two particular figure will look something like this. So during our online training, we will always do whiteboarding, although it is a soft copy, but over here we'll just simulate how they actually looks like. Okay, so for this particular latency control, earlier in topic 2, we already discussed some of the component required and how your backup will be happening basically. So most of the time, our backup will be focusing in the ESX machine itself, for example. Now, your ESX machine comes with a data store that holds your particular virtual machine. Now, the latency control we are looking in here is basically this part. Okay, so what it will do over here is the VBR machine, okay, this is basically your backup server, will be connecting to your ESX machine to actually grab your read latency from the ESX machine or the vCenter every 1 or 2 minutes, just to make sure that your workload from the ESX machine to the data store will not be congested where your production VM is hosted. Now, this will be happening due to when you trigger a backup job, your proxy is basically reading the same virtual machine data from the same data store itself. So when I perform an extra write I/O to the data store, your latency and your performance generally will be increasing. So over here, you will see that when you have a different latency control, so over here, I will basically queue subsequent job or task starting. Meaning to say, if you have the original current task that already been doing, it will still be continuing, just that I will not assign any extra tasks that will be stressing the data store itself. So another control will be 30 milliseconds. This one I will basically perform a throttle to the current task. What do you mean by that? So when you perform a throttle, your current task referring to the actual backup that is already running, I will throttle this particular read performance not to stress out the production data store so that your production VM will run as normal. So over here, this can be enabled to suit your original infrastructure environment so that it will not congest your virtual machine performance itself. Okay, so all these diagram during the LVC course, we will always save it as a record. So I will basically send it to the participant after the training ends so that you guys will have another copy of it. Okay, so let's go back to the particular training itself. Okay, so you will see this actually explain what the 20 millisecond and the 30 millisecond options do for. So over here, if you are looking into more control, for example, this particular setup is mainly a global setting that will get applied to multiple data store in one particular environment. Now, if you have different millisecond requirement for individual data store, you should upgrade your license to Enterprise Plus, where you can set threshold on individual data store with this particular button. So when you click on Configure, it will be able to choose which data store to assign different configuration individually. So that goes with our backup I/O control. Now, this is basically a live virtual class demo. So you can leave your comment below mainly for class sign up inquiry and not focus on technical question. So when you have any technical question regarding this particular feature, you should ask it during the class and even later on. Okay, so next thing, we'll move on to the global notification settings. So this one can be set in the VBR backup server to get email notification from the backup job itself. So over here, you need to have a SMTP server ready to send your email to the recipient. So you can set from which particular email address and also who will be the groups or administrator recipient with the subject pre-configured. And you can now select whether to get email notification for job successful, been done, warning, or even failure. Now the last option will be suppress notification until the last retry. Pretty easy, whereby all your jobs come with 3 times retry options by default. So if you have some infrastructure limitation whereby the first and second attempt fails but the third attempt is successful, now as an administrator we are more focused on the successful job and ignore the first 2 notifications. Now when you select suppress notice, I will only get the last retry whether it is fail or success. So this one will ease off a lot of administrator job, especially looking into the email notification. Now, if you have Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager integration, all your jobs will be compiled into per Veeam Backup and Replication Server basis. If you did not send notification from the Enterprise Manager with these particular default settings, you will get 1 email per backup job. So if you are managing multiple Veeam backup server in a huge infrastructure, it is recommended to use Enterprise Manager for your notification settings. Okay, so next thing will be the other notification that you can set from the Veeam backup and replication software. So first will be the backup storage capacity warning. This one will be focusing onto your backup repository. Now, if you do not come with enough free space in your backup repository, you basically cannot do any backup job itself. So when you will start a backup job, they will start to calculate the space required for the backup job. And if your repository for any reason below certain free space, you will fail the job itself. So this percentage will be able to change to suit your infrastructure environment. So the next one will be production data store. So over here, I will get a warning if the free space is below certain percentage, and I will also skip VM processing when the free space is below 5%. Now when you look into our diagram earlier, so most of the time our virtual machine will be focusing on the data store itself. So over here, we will require more free space on the data store to facilitate for snapshot functionality. Okay. So when you create a snapshot in your infrastructure, we will require more free space for your Delta disk to generate online read-write I/O. So if your data store comes with lesser free space, it is best not to create any snapshot, meaning no backup job will be happening, so that your infrastructure on your production side will not get any further issue. So you can basically define what is the minimum free space for it to keep before I will fail my backup job itself. So these are the few things that you can set for your backup storage and production data store. And another one will be the support contract expiration. If your Veeam backup and replication server is connected to the internet, they basically will detect via your license key to see whether you have a valid support contract on hand. So if your particular support contract is almost expired, you will get a notice 14 days before the actual expiration date where you should trigger a renew process with Veeam itself. And we do able to detect certain notification for the product itself. So for update notification, you can basically detect for Veeam VBR software whether V10 will be up or not, and hypervisor update is mainly focusing on to Hyper-V solution. So for Hyper-V, it mainly runs on Windows environment, and most of the time you will have certain hotfix need to be applied so that Veeam backup and restore job can be performed normally. Okay, so these are some of the notification settings that you will get. And we do able to control our backup data transfer. Okay, so over here you can basically configure another thing, what we call the global network traffic rules. So here you can control your options by multiple different rules to configure encryption and also throttling function. So this particular config will basically happens with configuration like this. So you can set multiple rules from one source to one target. If you have one source IP to multiple target, you just need to create multiple different rules for that. So what do you mean by the source and target IP? Now over here for the source and target IP is basically referring to Veeam component. Okay. So what do you mean by Veeam component? Pretty easy. Now, if I look into the same diagram over here, I have the proxy and repository. So this particular connection normally will be running on LAN or WAN, for example. Okay. Now, I can basically do throttling over here. Okay. Throttle or encryption. Now, if you are sharing the production LAN environment for your backup, certain things need to be throttled, especially when you are performing a backup during production hour. But this network traffic rule can only applicable to Veeam component. For example, over here, like the proxy to repository, or you can even perform the throttling from the proxy to proxy. Even repository to repository can be done, or the WAN accelerator to WAN accelerator. You will see that based on different jobs that you are trying to configure and achieve, it will include different particular component from Veeam itself. So you need to know which network segment that this component is now holding to basically get applied with the network traffic rule. So these are just a few scenarios that might happen in your infrastructure itself. Okay, so this is mainly for backup. Okay, so let's move on. So what can you do from the source and target IP? I can encrypt it. I can throttle with certain megabit, not to saturate the entire link in your network. And you can even trigger when to enable and disable this particular rule to be applied. So this one will require to sit down with the network engineer to see what are the segments used in the production infrastructure. Okay, so next option will be the preferred network. So here you can configure certain rules for preferred network. Now this is a special option mainly to apply to some environment where, for example, I have a different interface over here for management. Okay, so this management IP comes with 1 GE network, and this particular backup IP might be a different segment, come with 10 GE. Now, this will get some issue when I am resolving via DNS name for the repository server. So when you ask the DNS server to resolve the IP address to contact with this machine, sometimes you will get the management IP and sometimes you will get the backup IP. So if you have this particular scenario, your backup performance might not be consistent because sometimes you will be using 1 gigabit, sometimes you will be using 10 gigabit. So if you put in the preferred network, okay, for example, in the option just now, so I will put in the preferred IP address to get resolved, mainly to select the backup IP range using 10G, so that my performance will be much more stable. So this is a preferred one. If they still cannot resolve from the backup IP segment, they will still use the management IP. And as administrator, you need to troubleshoot on that issue. So this preferred network will be applied to environment where your Veeam component come with multiple interface like management and also backup. Okay, so this one explains a lot with a diagram together. So what can you actually define for the preferred network options? Okay, so that goes with our short topic live demo for the LVC, just to let you experience how the online training will actually looks like. Pretty sure when you join the actual live training, you can always ask questions from the Zoom meeting, because from a Zoom meeting perspective, the participants do have some mic function that they can ask questions straight away during the training. So this is a live demo. We cannot actually facilitate that particular demo to you guys yourself, and we do able to start the video conference together. But due to the Facebook Live limitation, I cannot utilize my camera and the share screen function altogether. Okay, so there are certain features that you will experience when you sign up with the live virtual class course. Okay, so enough of the LVC demo. Next thing, I will show you what the training material included when you sign in with this course. So when you sign up with the course itself, it comes with a 3-day live course and also 3 PDF documents. Now, these documents will be covering the VMCE course handout that you will get from an online access account that you can download. This particular handout will include all the PPT slides that we will discuss during the class. Okay, so this is for your study purposes. And another document will be the VMCE textbook. So this VMCE textbook will cover a lot of extra information for all the topics that we go through during the class, mainly for your study purposes for the exam itself. Okay. Then lastly will be the student lab guide. This student lab guide is used for you to study for your exam. And during the online lab session, they come with the embedded lab guide on the right hand side of your screen. So this lab guide is of your study for your exam, so that you don't need to open up your lab every time when you would like to look for certain options, okay, based on different topics itself. So this is one package for the training material included when you sign up with the class. Okay, so next thing will be the online lab demo. So now let's look into the online lab demo session. Okay, just show you around. Now when you sign up with the course, it comes with a lab session for 90 days access. So most of the module that we go through during the training come with its own lab session. So every now and then, the trainer, myself, will give you some time during the training to perform this lab, and when you have any question performing the lab itself, you can always ask the trainer during the LVC session. So I will just demo a bit from the short topic, module 10, creating backup copies. So when you launch your lab itself, basically you are connecting to the landing machine that I mentioned earlier. So this is the Veeam backup and replication server, as you can see over here. So the time itself will be having some limitation here. When the time runs to 0, the entire lab will get reset and you need to start all over again. So let me roughly show you around how this lab actually looks like. So on the right will basically tells you what you need to do during this lab for different module. As you can see here, for lab 10.1 is basically asking you to show around how you can create a backup copy job. So over here, first step, I will require to launch the backup and replication console. Okay, click on connect. So you can check every step that you have already done for easy monitoring and keep track. Okay, so let's let the software load for a while. Now, please remember all the lab for different modules did not have a direct relationship between them. Meaning to say you can always do your lab in between the session, not necessary to do lab from 1 to 10 in a sequential manner. Each of them are individual, meaning to say if you did not complete module 2, you can always go to module 4 to continue your lab. And if you have any issue like maybe misconfiguration or you break the system accidentally, you can always click on cancel to reset the lab to its original state. Then you can always perform the lab again from the start. So you will see that on the right, all these are the steps that you need to do during the lab. You don't need to open up the PDF copy, so that if you are having one screen only during the live training, it's still able to perform the task easily. So the backup replication console is up. I will basically click on the backup copy button on the home ribbon. So you will see here, backup copy. Click on it, select virtual machine, then go for VMware vSphere Backup. Okay, so for the name itself on this backup job, this is another cool feature that I would like to show you. So over here, when you select and highlight this particular text box, you can always click on this shortcut to copy and paste what the lab guide is asking you to do so. So this is a pretty cool and easy feature to use to basically give you faster access. Okay, so enter the name, then modify the copy to every 2 days. Okay, just to avoid misconfiguration. Click next on the job step, and next thing will be click on add button from a backup, then expand backup, Oracle, and Tiny VM. So you will see that all this job is pre-configured that you basically need to perform during the earlier modules of lab. But if you did not complete that, you can always come here and continue. So next thing, I will select Tiny Virtual Machine, Tiny Veeam, then click on the add button, then click next in the object step. So next thing, we'll move on to the backup repository. So step 15 over here, click on the backup repository drop-down menu, and then select the remote repository. And now lower the restore point to keep from 7 to 3. And you can able to click on the advanced button. So over here, you can check on defragment and compact full backup file. So leave it as default. Now, all these technology and feature we will basically discuss during the actual training session with the PPT slides. So after the discussion, then you will come into the lab session to perform your configuration itself to basically imprint into your brain what you learned from the theory training. So keep it as default, click on OK. So click on next in the target step. Okay, so when they prompt for sovereignty violation warning, this one we will also talk about it in our live training. Click on yes itself to confirm. Then we will need to select the true built-in when accelerator. So this one will be also discussed during our training, what you need to actually look for. So first you need to look for your source when accelerator. I will be using the Veeam VBR, and the target when accelerator will be the Veeam remote. So click on next, OK to ignore, and then keep the default setting in the schedule step and apply. Then in the summary, click on finish. So that will conclude the module 10 labs to create a backup copy job. So over here, they will show step by step what you need to be done. And before every lab session, we will always understand and go through the theory part first, so that later on when you do your lab, you will have more understanding what we have discussed during our training. So you can always end this lab, or you can perform other things if you want to. Okay, so there goes the online lab demo. Please remember, when you sign up with this VMCT course, you will get this lab session by default in the package, and you will able to access it during the 90 days period. So thank you for your participation. My name is Daniel again. So if you sign up for the upcoming VMCE course, you will be seeing me during the class. And thank you and see you again.